The War of 1812 by Kelsea Graham. The War of 1812 was fought between the United States and Great Britain. Britain was already at war with Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars at the time and began restricting trade with the United States to prevent them from providing food and supplies to France. Since Britain was fighting Napoleon, the British Navy was having a hard time manning their ships, which resulted in the impressment of American sailors. This was one of the main causes of the war. Of course, the United States was a relatively new nation and many of its citizens were born elsewhere, which means many of them were British anyway. Another cause of the war were the conflicts between U.S. citizens and Native Americans. Americans were pushing westward into Indian territories, and more than 400,000 settlers had moved into these territories west of the original 13 colonies. Some Indians welcomed civilization, but others wanted the Americans off of their land. Among these other Indians were Tenskwatawa, a spiritual leader also known as the Prophet, and his brother Tecumseh, who was more militant in resisting white settlement. This is important because the United States received news that the British were encouraging Tecumseh and the other Indians, which angered Americans even more. The Indians' resistances and criticism led to the Battle of Tippecanoe, when William Henry Harrison and his troops marched into and destroyed Prophetstown. This further damaged Indian and American relationships because Britain was supplying the Indians with weapons, which further pushed America into war. In April 1812, President James Madison's administration went to Congress to request a 30-day embargo on U.S. shipping as a preface to war. In June, Madison officially asked Congress to declare war against Great Britain. This was the first time the United States declared war, and it was a very close vote on whether to declare war or not. It was a vote of 79 to 49 in the House and 19 to 13 in the Senate. This makes it the smallest margin of any declaration of war in American history. Northern states were reluctant, possibly due to their reliance on trade, but southern and western states were strongly in favor, perhaps for land expansion and to have that land for farming and slavery. The Jeffersonian Republicans had not built a strong army, which made America unprepared for war. Luckily, since Great Britain was still at war with Napoleon, they didn't really start invading America until 1814, when they defeated Napoleon. The United States had 17 ships and not near enough money to fund the war, while the British had 1,000 ships and much more money. Of course, before Britain's win against Napoleon, there were events that occurred. In August 1812, the U.S. suffered a humiliating defeat after Tecumseh's forces chased American troops led by General William Hull across the Canadian border, scaring Hull into surrendering Detroit with barely a shot fired. On October 13, 1812, U.S. forces invaded Canada to take possession of Queenston Heights, mostly to create a diversion from another planned invasion of the upper St. Lawrence River. Lieutenant Colonel Winfield Scott led forces across the Niagara River into Upper Canada and fought and secured the high bluffs. They waited for reinforcements, but they never came, resulting in British forces capturing Winfield and his men as prisoners, humiliating the American army once again. This became known as the Battle of Queenston Heights and the first major land battle in the War of 1812. The only significant American military success in 1812 occurred at sea. U.S. warship Constitution was looking for rumored British ships when they encountered British warship Guerriere. The two fought for 3 hours until the Americans destroyed 2 of Guerriere's masts. The Constitution was nicknamed Old Ironsides and had minor damage. The British captain and crew surrendered due to their ship damage, and U.S. Captain Isaac Hull had the British ship burned. Another significant battle took place in September 1813 when Commodore Oliver H. Perry defeated a British naval force on Lake Erie known as the Battle of Lake Erie. In October 1813, Indian forces led by Tecumseh were defeated and Tecumseh was killed at the Battle of Thames near Detroit by American forces led by William Henry Harrison. This gave the United States control over the Northwest and also ended Tecumseh's Confederacy, which had been trying to stop Americans from seizing Indian land. The Indians were continuing to help British forces, and in March 1814, the war had spread to the Southwest in conflict with the Creek Indians. This led to an attack by Andrew Jackson, defeating the Creeks at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, later being known as the beginning of the rise of Andrew Jackson, soon promoting him to Major General of the United States Army. By January 1814, President Madison accepted the British offer of peace negotiations, but these talks were delayed until July. British impressment was no longer an issue since the war with Napoleon was over, but negotiations of territory continued. During this time, the British invaded the United States, seizing Washington, D.C., and burning the White House. Neither wanted to continue the war, but continued land negotiations. The United States wanted to return to pre-war territorial divisions, while Britain wanted to create an independent nation for the Indians in the Northwest. No territory changes occurred, but the Treaty of Ghent was signed in December 1814, ending the war. There were no provisions about impressment or shipping rights, meaning everything basically returned to what it was before the war. News of the treaty didn't reach North America until weeks after it was signed, so in January 1815, the Battle of New Orleans occurred. Major General Andrew Jackson only lost 71 men, while nearly 2,000 British casualties resulted. The War of 1812 officially came to an end on February 16, 1815, when the treaty was ratified. The Star-Spangled Banner was actually written during the War of 1812 on September 13, 1814, by Francis Scott Key when he witnessed Baltimore's Fort McHenry raising a huge American flag to celebrate a victory over British forces. The broad stripes and stars inspired Key to write the poem that was later set to music, becoming America's national anthem in 1931.